How often do you see common sense being used in your everyday life? How often do you use common sense or think you use it? Common sense is not such a common thing in our world. There are probably many points to validate this statement, but a few are: what is common sense? People's everyday decisions, and lastly, how common sense is determined by the inexperienced. Although not having or using common sense is a funny thing to think about, it is very reasonable. To these key points, I'll explain why and how common sense is rare in our world. Let's jump in and explain. So what is common sense? What is your definition of common sense? The definition of common sense is a basic ability to perceive, understand, and judge things, which is shared by nearly all people. This may be true between a common group of people, but is it true that nearly all people will agree and think alike? The answer is no. As I'm sure we can all agree, common sense is viewed differently depending on the subject, skill, other occupations, and how difficult the other person is you're trying to convince. If you are knowledgeable in one skill or position and not another, could you understand and judge that other position with no background information? You probably could, but more than likely you would not be agreeable with the other person or people that occupy that position, skill, or whatever else it may be, that have the knowledge. Common sense is also judged based on your decisions. This takes us to our second point. Secondly, common sense is based off people's everyday decisions. We all know the goofy, and as some of us would say, stupid decisions people can make, including myself. People are judged a lot off the decisions that they make every single day. One of these judgments may include if they are sensible and if they use common sense during their everyday perceived rational thought. Although we may think we are being sensible human beings, you should probably look at the little things in your life. Some of these may include eating unhealthy when you know what is right for your body. Smoking is another one of these decisions. Some people that are seen as intelligent in your life or society are constantly making an unhealthy decision for their life. Therefore, they are being unsensible. This list goes on and on. Not very often do you see somebody that is doing everything right for themselves and their decisions. This supports the statement that common sense is a rare thing between all of us. Most of the time, what leads us to make these poor decisions is our inexperience in that certain field. This leads us to our last topic. Lastly, is that common sense is determined by the inexperienced. Many times, I believe we can all say we have met that one know-it-all who thinks they know what they're talking about in a certain field that they don't. These people can also be described as hard-headed and self-centered. I spoke a little about this towards the beginning of the speech. Most people end up making their own standards on what is common sense for a subject, position, etc., when it's not their place, meaning they are not specialized or educated in this. This here explains another nonsensible or dumb decision people can make. Once someone has done this, it can completely throw off the correct understanding of what common sense is. You can think of this as a domino effect. One person does one thing that doesn't use common sense, and this then causes another person to fall down the same hole. After all, common sense is not such a common thing we have in our world. Through explaining what is common sense, people's everyday decisions, and how common sense is determined by the inexperienced, I explain why common sense is not something used very often. So rethink how you use common sense in your life. Are you being sensible? Try using trial and error. Although it's funny to think about the world not using common sense, it's time we start realizing it and trying to better it. Thank you.